We've had a couple of leaders from Flip on call with us, from their founder, Ari or Rafi Arian, their now VP of Product, Surab Gupta, as well as their current CEO, Pratyush Prasanna. And now we have their head of AI and engineering, Tho Srinivasan, right?
Yeah.
Did I say it right?
You got it right.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. So yeah, really happy to have Tho on here for a few reasons. Not just because he's from Flip, but he's also now officially an alumnus of Insignia Ventures Academy, our certificate in venture capital program, which just finished a few weeks ago from this recording. So we're not just going to talk about Flip, we're also going to talk about his experience there. But I think even more exciting, we're going to talk about what he's learned over the years of experience he's had at various tech companies here in Asia and also in Silicon Valley as well. So yeah, but first off, maybe you can talk about how you decided to get into engineering and go from there. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for the intro. I have 3 T's and 3 H's in my name, but I just go by Tho. So Totati is my full name, but I go by Tho. Thanks for that intro. Yeah, I would love to start off. I think I originally am from India. I grew up in Bangalore, and so pretty much grew up there. I remember the first time I started getting into computers and electronics was probably in high school.
Yeah.
That's when we went to the I guess the old Infosys campus in Electronic City as they were just setting that up. Played around with a bunch of computers there, and I was like, damn, this is good. Got into electronics after with typical microcontrollers, breadboards, all of the nice stuff. And then over time, I did my undergrad in information technology outside Bangalore. I did it in a place called VIT Mestra, which is in Ranchi. After that, I moved to the US. So this is about 2010, and did my master's in computer science in North Carolina. I was there for a couple of years, and then I think we talked about this earlier, but that's when the Social Network movie came out, and they were talking about this place called Palo Alto. And I said, let me look up what jobs are there in Palo Alto. And turns out there were quite a few. The one that I applied and got into was a company called Groupon, the internet darling back in the 2011 time.
So started a lot of careers.
Yes, yes, definitely.
Careers, yeah.
Definitely. And did that in 2011. I was there, so 2012, I was there for about 3 years, and then moved to Netflix, and then to Pinterest, AI companies after, all of that after.
Yeah. No, I think I really like about what your whole story was the social network appearance and how that sort of influenced your decision to actually check out what possibilities there are for you as an engineer, and that led you to Silicon Valley.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the things, right? I saw the movie and they talked about Palo Alto. In fact, there's a dialogue in the movie. It says it's time for them to see this in Palo Alto, and Zuckerberg is talking about it with Severin. And that's what got me into this whole thing. And also, being a huge movie buff, that's what got me into Netflix.
Right. Oh, nice. Yeah, no, it just shows the power of these kinds of like media formats.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so you mentioned you work at a couple of companies, Groupon, Netflix, Pinterest. Maybe for our audience out there, maybe for those who are thinking about their own careers, or maybe in engineering like yourself, what are some of the takeaways from those companies that you worked at? Especially, I guess, since you joined them at a stage where they were already pretty, I'd say, well-known, established, no longer a startup from a garage kind of setup. What are some of the learnings from working there that are particularly still impacting you or influencing you until today?
Yeah, I think from an engineering standpoint, obviously, if you talk about Groupon, it's one of the first few companies which was moving away from some of the conventional ways of building software. We were starting to use Ruby on Rails, Backbone JS, all of these sort of new technologies we've been talking about back in 2010, 11, using all of that to build our product and infrastructure. Yeah. So that was a very interesting experience, especially coming out of, I want to say, the Java world at that time for a lot of companies. So I also want to say, so I was in Merchant Center at Groupon, right? We're primarily building dashboards and APIs for merchants to use to monitor how well they're doing, how many coupons are being sold, what is the redemption status, the timeline. Typically, we also used to see like a peak where people buy a coupon, they don't really use it. They use it right before the coupon expires, which is very annoying for merchants. So we were trying to like make that a little bit more even for merchants, right? So a lot of things that we did there. But I think biggest takeaway there, non-engineering side, I would say, is how hard sales was. I remember trying to pick up the phone and calling some of these merchants. One, merchants are super busy, right? And two, you're trying to sell them coupons. And that's when I realized sales is one of the hardest things that you can do. And to nail it and see our entire sales team doing this day in and day out, I think that's I had like a newfound respect for the entire sales team. And at Groupon, again, beyond that, we started doing dynamic pricing. We started doing specific A/B testing. So I learned a lot of things on how to A/B test things. We used to try a bunch of products out. If it doesn't really work, Then we just scrapped the idea and then move on, which was pretty interesting. Worked, obviously, headquarters was in Chicago. I was based in Palo Alto, and we'd also acquired a team in Berlin called City Deal. So worked with these 3 locations to build some amazing products.
Yeah. And then from Groupon, what was the next one?
Yeah, so I was at Groupon till about 2015. I moved to Netflix after, and this was an interesting phase for Netflix.
Right.
So I joined the team at Netflix, which is called Netflix Studio. They were trying to become the world's biggest studio. And so Netflix at the time, to give you context, was only in US, Canada, LATAM, Japan, handful of countries. And they were trying to expand to 192 countries that they're in now. And fundamentally what they were trying to say was Hollywood is a 100-year-old industry. We've spent a lot of money in VFX, in animation, in getting the best cameras and best techniques, but it's built on a 100-year-old institution, which needs some reformation, right? So we said, okay, I started working initially on content rights and music rights specifically. So if you have movies, you have music in that movie, the rights work differently for that. So we wanted to build a system that the legal finance folks can use in a streamlined way to reduce costs across all of these different aspects. So I did music rights for a while. I also did deals and contracts for a while. Typically how it works is we make an overall deal and then we say, we're going to make a movie with specific folks, right? So you say, okay, I'm going to do a movie with Albert De Niro, DiCaprio, a few other people. And then you say, okay, this is an overall deal. Now let's get actual contracts as a part of that deal to start the whole process.
So you're building the infrastructure to enable those activities.
Exactly. And ultimately, what was the goal here? Ultimately, the goal was one, of course, we're trying to monitor all of this in a better way to make sure that we have enough movies in specific genres releasing at the right time. So if you look at the entire sort of Netflix studio space, what we're looking at is pitch to play. So from the time someone pitches an idea all the way to when you hit play on Netflix as a user, that's a part that Netflix Studio handles, right? And this includes your recommendation engines and making sure that this movie can actually be played.
Pretty wide scope of.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think it's basically, can it be played in a specific format? So if you're flying from Singapore to Manila on Singapore Airlines flight, does the airline have the rights to show it in the screen in front of you in the language that you're watching it in? So that's the level of detail and granularity that it gets into. So we maintained all of that as a part of our system, and then
the whole message of it's not available in your territory.
Exactly. Exactly. Right.
Which I'm sure some people are not entirely happy about.
So all of that was part of the Netflix studio team, and so I was there for about 6-7 years. I worked on all of these things. I also did things in copyright management back at Netflix. Again, building things ground up. The scale of Netflix is obviously much bigger than what you would see at Groupon, at least on the merchant side. But primarily I was building internal applications for our teams to use and decide whether this movie should be played by this user or not. So I think obviously working at Netflix, in Netflix Studio on contracts, deals and everything else, we were talking about overall pitch to play, right? What does all of this do? We have a ton of data in Netflix, right? So what this gives us a unique advantage of is saying, what is the next genre we need to invest in? Who are the different artists who should be a part of this, and come together and saying, okay, let's do this. This is going to be the director. So good example here is Irishman, right? We say, okay, Scorsese is going to do a gangster style film. It's a genre along with De Niro and Joquiño, right? And so we think has a very high possibility of being a success based on the data that we have. So that's how Netflix started producing movies, purely using data and saying, hey, let's use the data.
There's like a scoring system.
Yeah, exactly. And then we say, okay, these are the different combinations that will make a great movie, and let's do that. But obviously, fundamentally in the movie industry, there's a creative aspect to it. And that's very hard. So Netflix, as they've built Stranger Things and done all of these amazing content that they've produced, there's a huge creative aspect that you can't just rely purely on data. Anyway, it's just a combination of both. So it's basically an art, not a science, same as VC, I guess.
There's a point at which it goes from a science to an art. I wonder if that's how they got K-pop Demon Hunters out. They had a score for the script and then they were like, okay, this one will work, or so they pushed that out.
I haven't seen that, but now I want to go in front of this thing. So I did that for a while, and then
on Netflix. Where'd you go?
Yeah, that was an interesting jump. I left Netflix and went to Pinterest. This is again because I wanted to be a little bit more involved on the shopping side. Pinterest was creating this new shopping vertical, and I figured, okay, this is an interesting time to come. And also, Pinterest is a company, hundreds of millions of users, similar to Netflix, but I felt like it hadn't gotten to the scale that it could be at, specifically from the monetization side. So that's what I came into tackle and handle. Built systems to handle monetization, primarily from, again, the merchant angle. So this sort of ties back to what I was doing at Groupon. I did that for some time, and then I was there for about a couple of years. But I think overall goal at Pinterest was, let's integrate shopping into all of the other verticals instead of trying to make it its own thing. And it's just been a couple of years, but that's around the time, I want to say, the first wave of AI started kicking in.
In what way was it?
I think that maybe a few months before I joined the HR AI startup I was at, that's when I think the ChatGPT really started getting popular. So primarily going on from traditional machine learning models into using some of the LLMs for AI, I think that's transition started happening. And that's when I said, okay, I feel this is something big and I need to be a part of that. I did that for a few months, and then I realized people weren't hiring in the US. Folks didn't really need HR AI startups at the time that I was there as much. And so I started thinking about what to do next. I took a break. And that's the time I actually came to Indonesia to spend some time with my wife and kids. And we were basically...
Why Indonesia in particular?
So Indonesia, my wife grew up in Indonesia, so it's obviously very close to her. And we had been thinking about moving post-COVID, both from a family perspective as well as just being close to things here in Asia. We felt we had a very wholesome life growing up in this part of the world, and we wanted our kids to experience that same thing. At the same time, I think from a growth perspective, everyone's talking about Southeast Asia and what's happening. Very different market from what you have in the US. Is one demographic, 300 million people. So let's get into a zone that we're not as comfortable in, more of a comfort zone, and see what happens here. So that's also part of the thing. Of course, being close to parents is a huge plus. Since we're here in Singapore, originally our idea was to move to Singapore, to be close to Bangalore, where I grew up, as well as Jakarta, where my wife's
sort of middle ground.
Yeah, exactly.
Flight-wise.
Yeah, exactly. And so I was in Jakarta just on a break, but that's when I met Pratyush for coffee. One thing led to another, and they were like, hey, we have this head of engineering role. I think it's pretty cool, pretty exciting.
Did you know of Flip already before you?
No, I hadn't heard of
So it was
Flip.
Pratyush first and Saurabh that you met, and then
Correct.
sort of learned about.
And funny story here, because I was telling my driver that I'm going to this company called Flip, and I'm talking to the CEO, and he pulls out his phone and he's like, hey, I use Flip, and look at how much money I've saved using Flip. And I was like, oh man, this is huge.
It was a sign.
Yeah, it was a sign. I was like, okay, damn, okay, now I'm cool. So then I went and met Pratyush and Saurabh, and that's
unintentionally, the driver was a HR.
Yeah, exactly.
was doing HR marketing for you.
Basically, he recruited me.
Interesting,
Yeah, so I think that's the story there. And then I talked to them and I saw the vision for Flip. And of course, I met Ari Lukmananjar after. But talked to them, saw their vision, building a fintech company here in Southeast Asia, in Indonesia, huge market, 250 million plus people. So building this for them, I think that was also pretty exciting. The scale of things is just huge. And obviously, if you think about it from a transaction amount perspective, maybe not. But if you look at the transaction volumes, absolutely huge. I've also been, obviously, one of the first internships I did was at Goldman Sachs a very long time back. Always interested in the finance space. So this was a perfect segue.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting. Thanks for outlining your whole career thus far. But I think it intersected. I think being an engineer, like you always have this kind of view that like engineers don't really interact with other functions. But then throughout your career, you've gotten into sales, you've gotten into learn more about the legal side of things as well, learn about like the finance side as well, and then cross different industries from like e-commerce to media and then now in fintech as well. So you're in Flip already. What made you decide to get into Insignia Ventures Academy?
Yeah, so primarily I've only invested in the public markets, right, in the US. And over time, obviously, I started looking at more angel deals and early stage deals. Had no idea how to go about things. And that's when IBA came up. And I felt like this was a great program to go over 12 weeks of rigorous training. So you understand the entire process of how companies are pitching to you.
Right.
What do you have to learn from those companies and figure out whether this is an investment that you want to put your money into. And I've met a lot of interesting companies there. But how I got into IBA was Mo Labsi.
Yeah. Cohort 1.
Yes. Introduced me to folks who are heading the program at IBA. So I talked to Jave and Megan and got to know what exactly is happening and what the goal of this program was.
Yeah.
And I think I was cohort 9.
Cohort 9,
Yes. It's come a long way, I think, in the last 3-4 years.
Yeah.
Obviously, I think we have a lot more structure now than the folks in the first cohort did. But that's how I got to know about what IBA does.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, okay, I think I should just do this
Yeah.
and learn about it. And it was an amazing experience. 12 weeks of, I think, is pretty intense. I want to say the first half.
Right.
Everyone who goes to this program will probably tell you that especially how to source deals.
Yeah,
Sure. Talk to founders, make sure you're not wasting their time.
Yeah.
This is something that you actually want to invest in. Yeah, but I think the entire experience was a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, and you were part of the AI team as well.
Yeah.
And I would say I'm interested to know how that sort of intersects with because your purview at Flip is also AI, and you were already like joined an AI startup prior to joining Flip as well. Like, I'm curious to know how that whole program. Obviously, it's a VC course, but at the same time, you get exposed to a lot of these startups that are building and the kind of products that they're putting together. Like, how did that impact your view of AI, especially in this part of the world?
Yeah, I think what was very interesting to me was the way I started thinking about some of the companies that are pitching AI, specifically if they're like tooling companies,
Yeah.
is will I be using them at Flip today? And if not, what is preventing me from using these guys?
It's great you have that kind of use case already readily available to you.
As soon as anyone pitches an idea, the first thing I do is, will I use it in my company today? And let's leave obviously the commercials are separate, right? And if not, what can I do? And then I started thinking more about, obviously as an angel investor, you also start thinking more about how do I help these guys? So a lot of the companies that pitch to me would address maybe 5% of the problems that we have at Flip. And I'm like, guys, you're focusing on 5%, not on the 95%. Why don't you like invert your product timeline and build the 95% that not just me, but I'm guessing most other companies would need.
Yeah.
And I started noticing companies were pretty receptive to that. And I know a couple of examples. They said, okay, we'll do that. They came back in 2 weeks. They inverted their entire timeline. And then that got me thinking into,
Which still fits in the IBA timeline.
Yeah.
Like that fast of a product iteration.
Yeah, very quick. So yeah, I think that was probably the biggest learning for me. Like, how do you use any of these tools in my current company? What will prevent me? And at the same time, just broader thinking about what is the moat for some of these AI companies. I think that's also very important. Is it a pure distribution thing? Do they actually have the data? Is it incumbent trying to get into the AI space, which also we've seen a lot of? So definitely different learning angles there.
No, I think, and it's pretty interesting being an AI team, I guess. There's a little bit of advantage, like talking to companies and giving them feedback because it's a little bit more actionable in a shorter time period.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
guess, especially if they have a SaaS model and it's smaller organizations, not necessarily enterprise that they're selling to. So I guess they could readily test any feedback you might have for them. I'm also curious to know what are your takeaways, I guess, from a investing point of view. We talked about like just before recording this that you're part of the XA network, which is an angel network as well. You mentioned you'd only been investing in public tech companies before. Like what made you, I guess, like confident enough to eventually get into angel investing, and what are the takeaways from IBA that have influenced that?
Yeah, I think IBA, the biggest takeaway that I have was obviously doing enough due diligence as you're getting into all of these companies. At the angel stage, you don't have a whole lot of context about what this company can do. A lot of times you are investing in the founder.
Which is part of the appeal for angels.
Exactly. And I think like what I was looking for, I'm sure a lot of other folks are too, is how good are the founders? How good are they at execution, at sales? Do they understand their weakness? And are they willing to hire people to cover that weakness? And I think those are the sort of the important things. Of course, we're also looking at product and market and making sure that they have a good strategy for all of these aspects. But I think early stage angel investing, that's what it was. Why I got into XA was, I think, obviously I was I'm ex Netflix, and this was started by the XA network was started by I think ex Google and ex Netflix folks or ex Amazon. Anyway, ex Fang, and that sort of put me into that bracket. And I said, okay, this is also a great way for me to network with folks here from a similar background. Obviously, I lived in Silicon Valley for a very long time. This is the first time I'm working here in Southeast Asia. Basically, means my network here is non-existent. I said, what do I do to build a network out here? And XA was a very obvious choice.
No, I think it's a great network. We have some Insignia portfolio founders in that network, like JJ. Alapsi from the core one is
he's the one who recommended me to XA. Yes.
He's been a great wingman for you. Absolutely. And so I'm also curious to know, like from IBA, like what was the highlight for you throughout this whole program that you would actually recommend to other people who are maybe exploring how they can better integrate or embed themselves in the ecosystem and are looking for programs like these?
I think the 12-week program that IBA has, each week you're learning a different part of how to think as an investor, right? And then obviously the eventual goal is to pitch to the investment committee. And over the 12 weeks, you have multiple check-ins to actually do that presentation. So you're looking at how exactly you're presenting the companies that you have sourced. A lot of times you've spent a lot of time, energy, and effort talking to these guys. So you really want it to succeed. And so you need to be like thoroughly prepared, I think, for the investment committee. Obviously, you have different parts of it. You're looking at the market. itself. You're looking at the founders, what they're doing. You're looking at the idea. You're looking at all of the due diligence that you need to do, GTM strategy that they have. Eventually, of course, you're also looking at the cap table and everything else. So I think for me, it was, I didn't understand what any of these terms meant. I didn't know what the customer acquisition cost meant. I didn't know what a TAM, SAM, SOM was. I obviously come from an engineering background, it's very different. But now that you understand all of these things, you understand what a cap table is, why we have safe nodes, all of these things I've learned over time. And I think 100% of that credit goes to IBA because it just teaches you all of those different aspects that you would spend a lot of time learning.
Yeah.
But the beauty of it is, I think, after each class, you go back, do some work, come back and pitch the next week.
Yeah.
And then you have some learnings from there going forward. So I think each week, our pitch kept getting better and better.
That is something that we see a lot.
Yeah. And eventually, I guess like we got the best due diligence of just.
So congrats on that. Yeah, we'll definitely get you guys back to mentor future generations on how you guys did it. But I think the interesting thing is that obviously you get to see a lot of improvement from the cohort, not just your cohort, I think the previous cohort as well. And it's like when people tell me, oh, they're not really sure about how they're going to proceed with their first IC meeting, I say that's fine because it's probably not going to be great. But at least if you're starting from not so great, at least there's like room to improve and all of that.
Yeah.
You joined XA, post IBA, and like what else has this kind of inspired you to do? Like this whole experience?
Yeah, I think it's been great. And like I said, I think this has been my pivot to VC in some ways. Obviously on the angel investing side through say non-public, but also just joining part-time as a venture partner at M Venture Partners, a small fund here in Singapore, trying to grow to a much bigger scale. And MVP has been interesting. Mayank and Tanuja from MVP, I talked to them multiple times and it seemed like a very right fit. So I think these are the opportunities that you can get post IBA, which could be very interesting to folks, especially as folks like trying to transition out of product engineering, sales, let's say marketing into what the VC world means and taking small steps. And I think this sort of accelerates that significantly, in my opinion. Other thing I want to add about IBA, obviously talking to all of the partners who come on and learnings from all of them, right? I think we had England, we had Yongchang, we've had Tim, we had Chefali, all of them, and you know how each one of them brings a unique skill and what they talk about, right? And so there's so many learnings there. It just feels I'm a sponge and I'm just trying to absorb all of this water from pretty much everyone sort of sharing it, right? And England, just the way he thinks about who am I today and can I be 1% better tomorrow? I think that sort of really resonated with me. All of that, as well as the other aspect, right? I talked about how hard sales is, but interestingly, how England thinks about it and saying, hey, first, go talk to your customer, figure out what they want, then go back to your engineers and say, guys, let's build this because we have a customer with a problem. Then go back to the customer and say, hey, it's time for you to pay up. We built this amazing thing for you. And I think just all of those different aspects based on his career and his life, that also has been super amazing. So really enjoyed the program, highly recommend it.
Yeah, no, if you guys are interested in the program, then obviously reach out to our website or message any of our team and to schedule a call and learn more. But yeah, thanks though for the shout out.